Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Hi, Rob Browne here with you on this Thursday morning edition of Sidelines. And a lot to talk about today. Hey, we're here 6 days a week, 8 to 10 a.m. Central, 25 shows a month, 50 hours plus of content. So looking to get a lot of great information on the SEC and Southern College sports and really sports around the country, because you can't talk about the SEC without talking about the ACC and, of course, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the Big 12, Sun Belt, Southland, Southern Conference, Conference USA, American Athletic Conference. They're all interconnected. So we're going to start off with Dudley, Dawson, Hogville.net, who is over in Springdale or Fayetteville today. He lives in Springdale, but we'll be covering the Arkansas Baseball Regional they're hosting. They got a tough region. We'll talk about that segment after Dudley. Gary Harris, WVUA TV 23, Tide 100.9, checks in from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, also a host in this NCAA regional. We'll get into that and talk some football as well. Hour number 2, John Hartwell, AD at University of Louisiana Monroe, ULM, the Warhawks, will check in, talk about what they learned last week at their Sun Belt Conference meetings. And Coach Matt Dean from Rhodes College checks in as well. We're going to be talking about the SEC spring meetings. An interesting article by Ross Dellinger, SI.com, about NIL. A lot of what we've been talking about, preaching, whatever you want to call it on this show, but it is whatever you want to call it. Some even say it's money laundering. But for the record, I hate NIL for what it is. I'm an absolute capitalist, right-wing patriot. Believe we ought to have every right, the freedoms. We got to have all that. But 18, 19-year-old kids should not be wagging the tail. So we'll talk about a lot of that. Follow us on Twitter at Sidelines_live. And so let's head to the best background you can get, the Pebble Beach baseball diamond, Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net. We're blessed to have him on our team. And Dudley, man, this region the Hogs got, it's a tough region. So let's first off, let's talk about that one. You muted?
So there are no easy regions. Obviously Arkansas has some good teams here. TCU is a team that played the second game of the year and got beat 18-6, but that was 4-4 in the 5th inning. And then Dave Van Horn got some freshmen some experience, and it was quite the experience. TCU at one point was 23-20. Has been on a run, won 12-13 lately. Arizona was hot, but was one of the last 4 teams into the tournament. And then you got Santa Clara, who has won 8 in a row. Came out of Gonzaga's league and is a team that certainly has a lot of talent. But when you're 30-4 at home, you're the number 3 national seed. You're supposed to win your regional, and that's what I expect to happen. If they have a bad game, could they lose the regional? Certainly, it is not a cakewalk, but it also is not the toughest regional, I would think.
Yeah, and you think about Arizona and Arizona State, Southern Cal, UCLA, Stanford, big names for a long time. The West Coast dominated college baseball. But this isn't the Arizona that we're accustomed to. They were kind of surprisingly a selection, if people want to say. But we all know this. Once you start playing, it's completely different. And I guess one of the biggest things you got to overcome is lack of familiarity with the opponents.
Yeah, and obviously Coach Van Horn and his staff have been doing a lot of research the past few days, watching a lot of game tape, and he mentioned that he had seen, obviously seen TCU up close, had watched a lot of Arizona games late at night. Probably like me, if there's a baseball game on TV late at night, he's going to watch it. But I think that it's a good regional. I'm not sure that it is the toughest one around. That being said, go out, pitch well, which is a big key in these things. Pitch well, hit the ball a little bit, and move on.
What is the strength of the Arkansas team right now? Are the pitchers? I mean, you didn't win Hoover, but you went to Hoover. Everybody that went to Hoover played at least one game. But I'd compare it to Texas A&M, they just looked worn out. They ran out of pitchers, ran out of arms, and Vanderbilt laid it to them Sunday. But I think about it, Dudley, everybody has the same problem. Pitching, depth, injuries, and all like that. But give us a report card, because I know you talked a few weeks ago about Matt Hobbs, the pitching coach of the Razorbacks, who turned down the job to be the Yankees pitching coach. So they've got a hell of a coach.
Yeah, he's done a great job. Apparently, he's being one of the guys mentioned for Missouri's vacancy. He played there and could end up there, but he's here right now. I do think that the health-wise, the pitching is about as good as it has been all year. Now, certainly, there's some guys you'd love to have around that are out, but your starting pitcher, you're going to be able to go with Hagen Smith, in the first game, if that's what Coach Van Horn decides to do. You've got Brady Tigert and Hunter Holland also ready to go, all who have pitched well. And for maybe the first time this year, you've also got Will McIntyre, Cody Adcock, and Zach Morris all pitching well at the same time. So you've got some depth there in the middle innings. Now, the one thing I would say is the youngsters have been on the road and have gotten hit a little bit, but now that they're back home, I think these freshmen will feel more comfortable, and I believe they're going to have enough pitching to get through.
I asked you this about 5 weeks ago. Is this the best team Dave Van Horn's had in the last 5 years? And you said it's more or less it's the most experienced team, maybe the toughest and the closest team. Kind of that and how much I think that at this point they've been so many times to Omaha. A lot of these guys have been multiple times. You got to find something new, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, this has been probably one of his best jobs, coaching or managing, however you look at it, because he's had so many injuries, had to deal with a pitching staff that he thought was going to be truly deep, but ended up with injuries just mixing and matching. You've had a lot of guys come along at the top of that lineup. Peyton Stovall's, obviously out for the year, but Peyton Holt has come in and filled in admirably for him, hitting 400 at one time or another. I do think that when you look at the overall team, I think there's a closeness. They've overcome adversity already, so it won't be really like Tennessee last year when they had no adversity during that great season they had. Got into the tournament, a few things went wrong, and they didn't make it out of there.
Well, I think we've also seen the last few years, I guess in the 21 season when Arkansas won every regular season series and they won in Hoover, they won the whole thing and got knocked out of the damn tournament. Tennessee last year wins the SEC regular season, wins almost every series as well, and they win Hoover, they get knocked out at home in the Super Regional. I'm not one of these people that ever believes you should go there and just get out and not try to win. That's insane. But rest is critical. How deep is this Arkansas bullpen right now? Because you're going to be playing a bunch of games stacked again. It's just no different really than the 3-game weekends. But are they deep enough? And who would you compare Arkansas's pitching staff to in this region from what you've studied so far?
I think that pretty much it's like a lot like TCU. I think they've got some frontline guys, have some middle relief guys that have kind of fallen into that role. They're pitching well. And then the bullpen, I think there's so many young kids, and it's tough to distinguish between a bullpen and a long reliever these days. Arkansas so many times has gotten a start of 5-6 innings, and then a second pitcher has come in and pitched to the finish. It happened a lot with Kevin Kopps back in the day. It's happened a lot this year. You mix and match in different situations. Gage Wood, some of the others that Cody Adcock I mentioned, have come in and finished off games. But I do think that middle relief has become long relief, has become finishers. So I do think they feel good about where they're at going into this tournament. Now, would it be great if Gage Wood or one of these other young pitchers could come out in the first game or second game and get a few outs and get their mojo and confidence back? Yes, that would be great for Arkansas down the line, later in this regional and then the super regional, and if they do make it, the College World Series.
Well, when you look at style of play, there's a different style they play on the West Coast, and Arizona's part of that. And TCU in the Big 12, I imagine it's about the same as what we see in the SEC. But do you think that is some? Dave Van Horn has been coaching 20 plus years. I know they lost to David Lipscomb in Little Rock, but the game hadn't passed him by. And I love how you pointed that out. Fans, as Butch Thompson said, God will never forsake you. Your family will never forsake you. Your teammates, you got them, but the fans are the first ones to jump. If it was up to the fans, things would be a lot different. But let's talk about that.
Well, I think that Santa Clara, it's going to be somewhat of a culture shock for them. Now, they may play great because they've played before fans of 250, 383. There's going to be 10 to 12,000 there this weekend. They're going to be roaring. Now, it will be, this first game is going to be Friday at 2. So maybe it won't be as spirited as need be, but Coach Van Horn likes to play that game because then you get that second game. You get so much rest between the first game and the second game. Which would be at 8 o'clock. So I'm really curious to see how Santa Clara, do they thrive in that environment, or is it a little too much for them? Now, I would think TCU has played before big crowds, including a big crowd full of Arkansas fans down there at Globe Life Stadium. And in Arizona, as a traditional program, Arizona beat Tennessee the first year when Tennessee was number 2. They've certainly, got on a run here lately. And they may come out a little, with a chip on their shoulder because all they've heard since they got in was that they shouldn't have been in.
I think Ole Miss heard that a lot last year,
mm-hmm.
and that helped fuel them a lot. Dudley, when we talked with Coach Thompson, he said, and obviously Auburn's stadium, they're landlocked. I mean, it's much smaller, a little over 4,000 compared to Arkansas's Palace, but it took less than 5 minutes to sell those tickets out. Arkansas, I'm sure it was a similar situation. Isn't it great to see baseball coming on like this? And would you say that, I know there's NIL involved with it, but again, it's not the Monty Hall out there, let's make a deal, which a lot of these coaches must feel like today of, well, let me get you another 25 or 50,000 because this school or that school is offering you this much. Whether it's true or not, these guys are coming and telling them that. Baseball is without a doubt the greatest game you can attend in person. You cannot beat stretching out or just being there drinking a cold beer, big old hot dog, maybe one of those giant pretzels or whatever. It is called America's pastime for a reason.
Yeah, as I've made clear on this show many times, it's my favorite sport. I love all the others too, but that's my favorite.
Yeah.
My longest one that I've both played and watched. And I'm happy that college baseball is getting a lot more attention than it used to these days. This will be the month. Now we are in June now, aren't we? This June 1st. Right?
Yeah, it's where did May go?
Yeah, this will get. This is a month that usually gets the most attention because of the NCAA tournament and the College World Series. So looking forward to it. We'll see a lot of surprises. I'm sure we'll see a lot of chalk as it goes along here. But yes, I love that college baseball is getting so much attention. As we've talked about a few times, there are a lot more players that are going into college and getting that development instead of going to the minor leagues as the minor leagues contract and college baseball gets better. There is a lot of money at the top for the top players in college, but it is not as pervasive as it is in football and basketball, to where it's a spreadsheet type thing.
Yeah, Kyle Peterson, former Stanford pitcher, was on SEC Network. I guess it was Monday during the selection show, talked about 48% of the players on opening day Major League Baseball rosters had played at 4-year colleges. And then obviously there's a lot of foreign players that are in there as well. That number, I think, is just going to keep rising.
Right. And then you've got Bryce, who came from junior college, Southern Nevada Junior College. So there's a few of those along the way. And I saw a story the other day about a young man who is Maine's best player ever and is now in the major leagues. So, it's such a collection, but I do think that the college game puts you in a situation where you're playing before some big crowds, you're playing in interesting situations, and you've gotten like Arkansas and some other places, you have development centers, performance centers. They call them all different things. But when talking to baseball recruits that Arkansas is either interested in or have committed or have signed, that is one thing that they talk about the most, that really they don't think they could get that development in the minor leagues, in a I don't know, Quad City or whatever. I'm not disrespecting Quad City or whatever, but it's a situation that, is perfect for a lot. I mean, one kid this week who's the Will Edmondson, the Jayhawk Conference Player of the Year from Hudson, said he's in baseball paradise. He's getting to come here and play.
Well, you look at the fact you mentioned about development, the 4-year schools, there's also 48 fewer farm teams out there affiliated with Major League Baseball. So that's putting the squeeze. The draft used to be, what was Mike Piazza, 62nd round or something like that?
It was a lot. It was a nice hit late for them, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sure was. So you look at development, and that is so important. And you as much as schools invest in football, I look at some programs and there's little to no development of players once they get there. But in baseball, you look at what they've invested at Arkansas, the payoff, the return on investment, it's obvious. And that coaching staff, you mentioned Matt Hobbs, hey, he gets the job at Missouri. If he does, good for him. He's the head coach, but that's going to be another major thorn in the side of everybody, because Missouri's got money. They've got that new NIL law. They can go out and recruit. So Arkansas doing it. I mean, one of the premier programs in the country. Be right back. Dudley Dawson, hogville.net on Sidelines.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Homer Simpson back here with you, talking with Dudley Dawson, hogville.net. And Dudley, college baseball, you go back in the past when Rod Ditto was at Southern Cal, won 12 national championships, Arizona State, Arizona. For so long, they dominated. How did they fall off the cliff? I mean, I know we've got Arizona in this year. Stanford's a regional host. I don't believe, if I'm correct, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I don't believe Stanford beat a ranked team all year, and they were number 3 in the RPI rankings. They're a host. Then you've got Oregon and Oregon State. And Oregon State's won 3 national championships. They've got a hell of a program out there in Corvallis. But how did they fall off that cliff? Is it just a lack of money being spent? They're just cheap, or all the players suddenly just left California? Something's not right that the Pac-12 is not, where are their top 10, their top 20 teams?
Well, I don't think there's as much legendary coaches as used to be out there. There are guys who ran the program who got all the players. A lot of those players are now coming to the SEC, Big 12, other places. So I don't know that it's so much as a big-time fall-off as it is the other parts of the United States, and especially the SEC. I mean, they got, four of the top 6 national seeds, 10 teams in the tournament, 8 of the 16 host sites. I think that you can draw from that a lot of the players are coming to the SEC. A lot of these programs are strong, and I think that's taken away a little bit from, California schools and Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8, whatever they are these days. That that used to be so dominant. Texas used to be dominant as well. So I think the talent has been spread out, much like the parity that we see, some in college football now. It's not necessarily just one conference, even though there is a conference that seems to dominate a lot of different sports.
Well, and what's unique is in the Pac-12, you had those dominant runs by the teams we just mentioned. In the SEC, LSU in the 90s won 5, and then they won another one under Paul Maneri, but it's been a while. Since I think 2009, since their last national championship 14 years ago. But since then, you've had Florida win the national championship, the College World Series, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, ever so close. You don't see that in other conferences. And that Butch Thompson says that when you play those teams from the north, Michigan, Ohio State, and up in the Northeast, Maine or whatever, you learn things from them because they have to adapt. They can't get outside as much. They have to play a lot more indoor ball. So I think that's what's so much fun about watching this tournament. You go back when you and I were growing up, the NCAA tournament for basketball was big if your school was in it, but mostly it was conference champions, and that was it. It was small. That 1979 matchup, you cannot say thank you to Indiana State and Michigan State, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson enough, and Dick Enberg and Kenny Loggins for this is it. Make no mistake, that really launched it. Where, if you had to look back at a pivotal year in the college NCAA regionals, super regionals, or the World Series, what would you say was that moment when college baseball really started kicking into high gear?
Boy, that's tough to put your finger on a year. Now, I do think it's a decade. It was the decade of the 2010s. Is that how they describe it? I think that the exponentially the growth of college baseball, the popularity, TV, getting it on there now. The streaming services have helped a lot. ESPN Plus, SEC Plus, all that have allowed games to be televised if you have a smart TV. And I repeat, if you don't have a smart TV, then you have a dumb one and you need to go get a smart TV.
They're giving them away, by the way.
Yeah. If you want to watch baseball, that's one of the greatest things ever is these streaming services.
Yes.
But I do think somewhere in the middle probably of the 2010s that, things that the technology, the advances in the game, the amount of, being able to just watch games has really helped that out. And then you've also had some great teams, a lot of them from the SEC you mentioned, but really while Major League Baseball gets you plenty of games, I do think this month has been celebrated as a college baseball month. And I do think that it doesn't have to battle. It can battle with talking season, but it doesn't have to battle with football games. It doesn't have to battle with the NFL. There's some periphery there, but it's not, head on like you would during a lot of times.
It is. And you think about baseball, Major League Baseball, if it dipped in popularity, I don't know what it was, the steroid scandal in the late 90s, there's always going to be something to try to take away. But 162 game season, it's a long season. But then again, when baseball games are on, there's so much more. It's a little more laid. It's a lot more laid back. Mm-hmm. And when you go to the games, you just cannot beat it. Golf, you can't do that. You're always moving around. Can't have cell phones at most of these courses, and got to be quiet and all. Baseball, it's growing. I think we're annuitizing the future of Major League Baseball because the fans are locking on to these guys that are coming for at least 3 years, some of them 4 or 5 at the colleges, and they watch them now. Again, we had 88, Coach Thompson said this yesterday, 88 SEC players, former players, on Major League Baseball rosters on opening day. That is an incredible number, and that's going to do nothing but grow the game, I think.
Yeah, and as strange as it might sound, I think COVID actually kind of helped baseball out a little bit. That may sound strange, but they gave the extra season, to all the sports. But I think it, helped baseball maybe more than anything, because there were kids who would have left. The draft would have been so much, they would have had so many rounds. Now it's contracted to 20. But I do think that they stayed and developed an extra year, and that made the baseball that they were playing even better. So I do think that, that was one positive out of a big negative situation.
And TV wise, when you look at, again, I think baseball comes across on radio better than any of the sports. You combine that with TV, and we got you think about growing up, the Cubs with Harry Carey and Steve Stone, WGN, and then Turner Broadcasting System, TBS, 1979 launching, really showing all those Braves games. But you've got pockets of Braves and Cubs fans all over the country because of that. The SEC network and what ESPN's doing, ESPN Plus, that's going to do nothing but grow pockets of baseball fans everywhere. And really, I think what we don't know enough about, but just look at the Braves. I know with Andrew Jones from Curacao, the number of he put a lot of money back into, I guess his foundation and him did, into Curacao to help baseball and get kids interested in baseball. And you look at Ozzie Albies, he was one of Andrew Jones's kids, and that got hooked on baseball at a young age. And look at him now. What is he? 5'6", 5'7"? He's got over 100 home runs in his career, and he's had 8 multiple home run games. That's amazing. But where would he be, without that? I mean, that gave him a hell of an opportunity. And there's a lot of that, I bet, that goes on.
Yeah, the Cardinals have put in money into their Dominican Republic baseball deal. And in fact, I saw a report the other day about how they were about to sign a 16-year-old shortstop for over $1 million that they were going to give him instead of the other teams, because of the amount of time they had spent with that particular baseball academy down there. You talk about getting money as a youngster. You hope he continues his development and all that, but that's life-changing money for that young man.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, Dominican Republic, Haiti, $100,000 would be generational wealth in a country like that. And if you can hear in the background here, it is early morning, the crop dusters. I mean, that one may have been about 35 feet above the house here. Man, these guys are
something I'm used to from my 17 years on the farm. So
yeah, these guys are incredible pilots, and they're all over us, and everywhere around here is green: soybeans, rice, milo, corn. Good gosh,
backbone of America, man, backbone of America.
Oh yeah, and the rice, and it's unbelievable. Again, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, they're coming in. They'll take a few hours off, but they've got lights on those tractors now, and they got DVD players, and they've got stereos, and they're almost like some of them are computerized to where once the GPS is mapped out that field, it knows when to turn and do all the stuff. But those guys have always got something, a broken culvert, as working on a farm. But God love them; they are the backbone of America. Dudley, I know you're on a tight schedule this morning. You got to get over to the regional. What's the press conference and all like that going on? The media center there, I imagine there's a lot of people from around the country covering this.
Yeah, and the major outlets will have people here that follow college baseball so closely. Arkansas has a nice setup with the indoor track center that they use, and they also had a press conference room that they built with the recent renovation. So they're in a situation where they should be. It should be fun to cover it. Yeah.
Oh, it will be. That one was really close. I feel like they're not going to come too much closer. But Dudley, Dawson, let people know how they can keep up with you. You do great work. Look forward to having you on next week. Tell you how big college baseball is. And I've got so many more questions I didn't have a chance to get to with you. But we didn't even talk about college football. The Lindy's Athlons came out. 4 Razorbacks, first team, including KJ Jefferson, on that Athlons magazine. But let them know what you'll be doing and how they can follow you and all your commentary along the way in the regional.
Hogville.net is our website that we'll have a lot of baseball. Football recruiting is back at it now that June has rolled around, and basketball, obviously Jordan Walsh deciding to stay in the draft, Devo Davis deciding to come back. That leaves one spot left. Will it be for a 6'10" center named Grant Nelson? We'll see. But at hogville.net and fearlessfriday.com.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Hey, by the way, have you done anything, checked on what's going on over there at Wynn High School? I mean, the school was demolished March 31st by that tornado. The middle school opened 12 days later. The high school's been at, I think, East Arkansas Community College there in Wynn, but they've got to be working out and practicing somewhere. I imagine that'd be an interesting story to follow, along with all the schools in the Little Rock area as well.
Yeah, and they've, you wish them luck as things get back. They were a rival in high school with Newport, but also one of my first jobs was as a summer sports editor at the Win Progress. Way back in the day, Newport Daily Independent and the Win Progress were my first two newspapers. So, obviously got to give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, look, that's where you started. You never forget them. One other thing, too, we were driving up to Hardy on the Spring River Friday afternoon, going up there and do some fishing and canoeing. And, God, you can't get enough of the Spring River. 57 degrees coming out, and Rock Bridge catching trout. Spring River, absolutely full of rainbow trout. But I didn't realize this. There are only 13 sweet potato farms in America, and 2 of them are right there. One of them's right there just north of Wynn, between Wynn and Cherry Valley, maybe Vandale. It is labor intensive. Your workers have to get out on front on the machinery and hand pick all of the sweet potatoes. And
I can honestly say I was today years old when I found that out.
Yeah. I mean, it is incredible. We had sweet potatoes and rainbow trout for dinner the other night. And you cannot, but I didn't realize only 13 in the entire country. But these farms, when you're over in this area, there's nothing like it, the amount of farmland. And you can tell a sweet potato from anything else, but it's all hand. I mean, you got to do it all by hand. There's no harvesting with the combine. So sweet potato farmers, you might be the toughest people we know. But Dudley, thanks so much for your time. Keep us posted with all your information on the Razorbacks, and look forward to doing this again next week. This is the ECS House Industries Razorback Report, located right there in Cherry Valley, Arkansas. Chad House and the great people there backing the greatest people in the world, the American farmer. Take care, Dudley.
You bet. See you, bud. All
right. We've got Gary Harris on with us right now. 23 in Tuscaloosa. Just talking with Dudley Dawson. He's got to run over and get to the press conference for the regional that the Razorbacks are hosting. You got a regional there in Tuscaloosa. What a wild season it's been. Lost your coach. That's another story. This team really didn't miss a beat. In fact, they started playing better through all that. Kind of talk about, as a beat reporter, I love Buddy Martin's quote. An expert today is some guy that's not from the local market, comes in and has an opinion. And, oh, wow, we got to listen to that guy because he drove 12 hours or he flew in here. Nobody knows what's going on in Tuscaloosa more than Gary Harris, Rodney Orr, Tider, and Sider. You beat the pavement every day. You work your sources. I would say there was a former beer company that used to go, with this one, we salute you, Mr. Beat Reporter, but we can't give them any credit anymore. But what's going on in Tuscaloosa? I imagine there's a lot of excitement with this regional.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. And you caught me as most weeks on my morning commute to my radio show. But
I love it.
Yeah, I think that it's been a weird, strange trip for this team, this baseball team. But to be honest with you, they're really right where I think most of us that cover the team and most of the players and coaches thought that they would be going into the season. I think that Coach Bohannon, the former head coach, felt like that this was a really strong team, that, they were a lot of experience. A lot of guys came back, and some older guys that took advantage of a COVID year, and had a really strong pitching staff. And although it has been hit hard by injuries, because they had so much depth, they've been able to overcome it. But they were a pretty good team, but not, I think, the team that most of us thought that they would be. First probably 10 games or 12 games of the SEC season, record-wise, even though they've been in some good games and had some tough losses, they weren't where we thought they would be. And you were actually at that point in time thinking, will this team even make it for a regional? Yeah. And but they, played pretty well. And then you mentioned when the situation
Gary,
happened,
hold those thoughts.
Okay.
Let's take a quick break. Because this is interesting to hear you say this again. You're there every day, the beat reporter, the anchor. We're going to be back with Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa right after this. Gary, let's keep going down this road that Alabama, the path for this season. Early on, you didn't think they would even make a regional. Now they're hosting it. This is a big story.
Well, they felt like they had a really good team, like I said, going into the season. And but in this conference, as you know, you can just be a little bit off. They lost a couple of their starting pitchers, and next thing you know, they're in some tight ball games that they didn't win, because this team was really competitive all year. In fact, their run differential at the end of the regular season was the best in the SEC. They had a lot of games that they lost by 1 run or 2 runs, and they'd had some games that they won by run rule and 6, 7, 8 runs. So we knew they were a good team. But then that Thursday morning, when the news broke that Coach Bohannon was being relieved of his duties, you wondered what was going to happen, quite frankly. They had Vanderbilt coming in. They'd just gotten swept that weekend before at LSU, 3 really tough losses. 2 of those games, Alabama probably could have easily won, maybe should have won. They're coming off a sweep at LSU. They got Vanderbilt rolling in at number 5 in the country. Coach Bo gets let go on a Thursday morning, and they got to turn around and play Thursday night, and they beat Vanderbilt 11-2. Yeah. And then they came back Friday and lost, but came back Saturday and won that series. And since that time, they've been one of the better teams, I think, in the country. And I think they're probably a little underseeded. I thought softball maybe was overseeded. I think baseball is as a 16 seed. They get to host, but I thought that was a little low, to be quite honest with you. I thought they probably should have been, in that 11-12 range as a host. But as a 16 seed, I think they like their regional with Nicholls State, Troy, and Boston College. Of course, the downside is, and I think they'll get out of that regional, is if they win it, they're going to have to go to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to play the number 1 team in the country, Wake Forest, and that's going to be tough, barring some completely unforeseen upset at the Winston-Salem regional. But for Alabama, I think that this is where they should be. This is a regional team in terms of talent, in terms of depth, in terms of experience. And now they need to go out and win this regional. And if you have to go to Winston-Salem, they'll be an underdog, but anything can happen. It's best 2 out of 3. And, if Alabama's playing well, I think they're capable of beating anybody. So we'll see what happens.
Well, when Butch Thompson was on with us yesterday, he said, look, that schedule that you play week in and week out in the SEC prepares you for anything and everything that might come your way, that will come your way when you get into the regionals. So, you talk about if Alabama wins this region and Wake Forest wins theirs, which they will, they will, then they've got to go play on the road, but they've been to LSU. I mean, they've played Vanderbilt. So they have been tested. And I have no doubt that the 8 SEC hosts and the 10, when you count Tennessee and A&M, nobody has seen what they've seen just in that 10-game schedule. Gary, do you see the pattern? There's 2 halves, that first 5 series and the last 5. Man, the depth and just physical conditioning of the baseball teams really shows up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think, too, is Jason Jackson, the interim head coach, former pitching coach, well, still the pitching coach, but the interim head coach, said, when he got, moved into that position and, Alabama finished 9-2. And he said, people were saying, wow, what's been the key? And he said, well, really, this team's played well all along. Kind of what I said to you. He said, it's not like this was just some switch was flipped and they just started playing well. He said, we've been a good team all year. Yeah. And he mentioned, a lot of the close losses. I mean, that Alabama had been very competitive against everybody in the league. So this is not a situation where this was a bad team and then all of a sudden they just caught fire. They've been pretty good all along, but I do think over the long haul, 30 games, the fact that they were able to get back over 500 at 16-14 does speak to what you said, that the fact that they're a conditioned team, a well-conditioned team, a veteran team, a good team. And they're really, as I said, they're just right where they ought to be. It would have been a very disappointing year for this team, the way it's constructed, not to make it into a regional and really not to host a regional. And they're doing both of those. So like you said, it's all in front of them now. It starts tomorrow against Nicholls State. And then you try to get out of this regional. And as you said, more than likely, going to go up to Winston-Salem to play the number 1 team and Wake Forest and see what happens. But got to take care of business first. And it all begins with that first game tomorrow, because as we know, can you lose the first game of a regional and come back and win it? Sure, you can. But you don't want to be in that position right off the bat. I can promise you that.
That's right. You never, there's nothing to be gained by losing. People sometimes say, well, we needed that to wake us up. Not really. And that's winning. It just makes it the more, if you lose, you've got that much more pressure on top of what you've already got. Gary, I want to ask you this, just talking about baseball, you cover the high school region, 75 miles, probably within the Tuscaloosa footprint there. How strong is the middle school and high school baseball? And really it all starts with, Dixie Youth League and all like that. Is it as strong as it was 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I think so. I think there's really, really good high school baseball and youth league baseball, feeder baseball here in West Alabama up and through Birmingham. And I think it's really good. I don't think it's good enough that, if you're Alabama or Auburn, you're going to sit here and build your entire roster in state. I think that's probably unlikely. But at the same time, I think the best players in Alabama are really, really good. And I think there's competition there from Alabama, Auburn, and then the other schools from around the country want to come in here and cherry pick, because they understand that a lot of times with the way the scholarship structure is with the 11.7 and with Alabama and Auburn not being able to benefit from, lottery Hope scholarship and also not waiving out of state tuition for the out of state players. But a lot of the, Georgia and LSU and Mississippi State and Ole Miss and Vanderbilt and, Tennessee, they like to come into Alabama too. And understanding that a lot of times because of their setups, they might be able to come into Birmingham or Tuscaloosa and offer a kid more than Alabama or Auburn can offer him. So the pressure here in state to recruit is strong. If you've got, let's say the top 25 prospects in the state of Alabama, There's a lot of pressure on Alabama and Auburn to compete against each other, and then to compete against the other SEC schools, and also compete against strong programs in the state like South Alabama and UAB and Jacksonville State. So there's good baseball here, but as far as, the top players, you're not going to get them all. So you have to be able to go around the country and recruit as well. And I think Alabama and Auburn both have done that.
Yeah, and you look at the NIL, and I don't know how much NIL is coming in there. You got 35 players, 11.7 scholarships. Break it down, do the math. That's about a third of a scholarship for each player. There may be the occasional guy that gets a full ride, but that's few and far between. Are you hearing that in NIL is traditional fundraising? When you make a gift to the athletic department, you've always had to deal with Title IX issues. Is there an equal amount going to women's sports? Okay. And nothing against women's sports, but that's just the way that rule is. So with NIL, do you know how that rule applies? Like if someone says, I want to give $1 million to Alabama baseball, they can't take that and divide it up. It's going to be $1 million directly to baseball, correct?
Yeah, I lost you there for a minute, Rob. You were talking about the NIL, and I assume you're talking about can you dictate where your NIL money goes?
Yeah.
You can. I mean, they've got all these schools now have these collectives, but all the different sports are, trying to rally support for their sports. And if you're a donor and you say specifically, I want to donate to this sport, you can do that. You can earmark your funds. So I know that the baseball programs all over the country, in Alabama too, they're trying to get their piece of the pie. They're trying to generate some funds to have some NIL dollars available. There is one good thing about baseball is that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes the baseball student athletes seem to come from, families that sometimes have money, and have the ability to pick up the shortfall to some degree. So a lot of times you might be dealing with a family that, financially is in good shape, and maybe and they'll work with you a little bit. They're going to still want to get as much as they can, but they'll say, hey, we can, that'll work for us. And then oftentimes too, you're dealing with some of the top players that also understand they're going to be high major league draft picks. So sometimes, you sign a guy that's probably never coming to your campus anyway. So that's another thing baseball coaches deal with is you're, a lot of times competing against Major League Baseball. And if you sign a really top prospect, you're excited, but that it's going to be long odds that they're going to make it to your campus, although they will use that oftentimes in negotiating with these teams and in terms of where they're going to be drafted. And they'll say, no, listen, we'll let you know before you draft us. We're really happy that we signed with Alabama. And unless you draft us here where we can get this slot to make this much money, we're going to go to college. So there's a lot of negotiating goes on in that regards too. So baseball recruiting is a challenge to divvy up the money that's available, trying to raise NIL, dealing with professional baseball, and then actually being able to sign these guys and get them here and develop them and help them win games for your program. It's a really all recruiting's very challenging at the college level, particularly now, but baseball probably has its own set of challenges. They're unique as a sport.
Yeah, it really does. And again, you go back to how many players on Major League Baseball rosters went to four-year schools. And then, of course, the junior colleges always have been real strong. But the recruiting process, you're right. Remember, it wasn't but 3 or 4 years ago, Gary, that you would have the College World Series going on at the same time of the Major League Baseball draft. And you'd have guys out there playing in these pressure cooker games, having to worry about or just concerned, like, where am I going to be drafted? And their agents texting them and calling them on the phone. And it really was a problem. And I think that's a really smart thing. The baseball draft is much smaller than it used to be. And they're also allowing these players breathing room to enjoy the College World Series. And I think that's helped a lot in terms of that's all the focus is those games, not a bunch of analysts on breaking down these prospects in time playing in the biggest games to that point in their lives, the College World Series in Omaha.
Yeah, it's a good thing the way it's been restructured. I don't think there's any doubt about it, because if you're in the College World Series, you want your guys focused on that. And I think that it's become such a big event that if you get there, I think that you're right. I think most of the players are able to just enjoy the moment, focus on trying to win a national championship and not worrying about anything else. And that's a good thing. I also want to mention, Rob, in the last few minutes here that, softball is excited. It's been an up and down season for Alabama softball. I've always felt like they had a good team. I never thought that this was an elite team, and I did not think that they would make it to the Women's College World Series, but they got a good draw, a good seed, a number 5 national seed, and you got to give them a lot of credit, because you lose Montana Fouts in the SEC tournament, who has been your one dominant pitcher, and behind her, it's been a mixed bag. And then, she goes out and you don't have her for the regional. And then Jayla Torrance, who's the daughter of former Alabama football linebacker Jeff Torrance, she stepped up in that regional and was phenomenal. Pitched over 18 innings and didn't give up a single run. And so they get through the regional and they get to supers against a really good Northwestern team that went to the College World Series last year, and lose that first game. Montana did pitch and start, and then they come back and win, on Saturday and Sunday with a combination of Jayla Torrance and Montana Fouts. And, they play here in about a little more than 2 hours against Tennessee, SEC versus SEC, which is disappointing to open the Women's College World Series. But they're there. I think that's a major accomplishment. It's the 14th trip for Alabama to the WCWS. Of course, they've only won the one national championship, and I know they'd like to get another one. But I think it's been a major accomplishment for this team to make it to Oklahoma City. I don't think they're going to win it. I think they're a good team. I don't think they're nearly good enough to win the Women's College World Series. I just don't think they have enough offense. But I do feel like it's been a major accomplishment for this team to make it all the way out there. So I wanted to acknowledge them as well.
No, it is huge. And think about that, the College World Series, Tennessee and Alabama there, and Oklahoma will be coming into the SEC, and they're just a juggernaut. I mean, they've won multiple national championships, and they had that pitcher, I don't know, just a few years ago, Paige, whatever her name was just unbelievable. Gary, what gets me is, and I'm sure had a chance to talk to Montana Fouts and these pitchers on the softball team at Alabama. Some of them, they'll throw over 200 pitches in a game, and then they'll pitch again the next day. Now, they're throwing 65 to 70 miles an hour. What do they do that – I know the men, you pitch, you're off for 4 or 5 days because things are just desperate.
Well, Robin, now there has been a couple of things. First of all, and don't get me wrong, it wears them out. But it's the underarm. Yeah. The underarm throwing motion is a lot different than the top throwing motion, so they can pitch more innings. But in recent years, you'll still see a top pitcher sometimes pitch more than a lot of people that don't follow the sport understand. But the days of running a pitcher out there game after game have kind of been alleviated. Most of these teams have pitching staffs now, and they won't just run the same pitcher out there every day. So that's been alleviated to some degree. But you're right. If you've got a top pitcher and you're in a situation like the Women's College World Series, you might ride her for a couple of games. But it's very rare anymore. When I first started covering the sport, you might see your top pitcher in a 3-game series. And in those days, they play 3 games over 2 days. They play a doubleheader in a single game. But you might see the same pitcher pitch all 3 games, and you don't see that much anymore, Rob. It's a little bit different now. You really don't, Gary. I know you're about to do your show. Let people know how they can keep up with you, listen to you, and let's do it again next week. And hopefully, you'll have good news on the progress of Alabama. Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at GaryHarris_WVUA. On Facebook, you can find me Gary Harris WVUA23, my Facebook page. And Tide109.com is the website for the radio station. WVUA23.com is the website for the television station. And I'd love to have people join me and follow me and interact. Thank you so much, Rob. Hey, you bet. Have a great day. That is Gary Harris down in
Tuscaloosa. Always love having him on here. The beat reporters, the sports anchors, the beat writers that are out there hustling every day, they know those teams as well as anybody. And again, I'm going to say it like Gary said, it's a shame that the coaches now, they just want the national people coming in. I mean, I understand all that, but your local reporters, you're going to need those people. And they really do know day in and day out what's going on in Tuscaloosa or wherever they are. We'll be right back for hour number 2 with Coach Matt Dean and John Hartwell on Sidelines.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you. We've got Matt Dean, the coach over at Rhodes College in Memphis, checking in with us right now. Just before there, Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa. Got a lot to cover. You got Alabama, the women out there in the College World Series, softball. And look, listen, when people say this all the time, the women's softball team, there are no men's softball teams. Men play softball when they are, in their mid-20s because it's a drinking league and it's wife escape or whatever you want to call it, so they can go out on a Wednesday or Thursday night to Toby Park or whatever, and then head down to Alex's Tavern and drink some road sodas and have some burgers and hot wings and play shuffleboard. That's what softball is for them. But the women's softball College World Series, that is ultra, super competitive. It is a lot of fun to watch. It is a fast-paced game. I talk about in the circle, but it is exciting. Matt Dean, a lot going on right now. John Hartwell is going to join us in just a moment. He has just texted me and said that he's a couple of minutes behind, but I want to talk with you. The SEC spring meetings are going on right now, and down in Destin, and I think there's a lot of people we know what the obvious questions are, and that is SEC going to go stay with the current schedule model is not good. I mean, Georgia still has not played at Texas A&M. Missouri for the first time ever played at Auburn last year. And you don't play teams very often. You play the same teams, and you rotate a few. But there's a model of a 1-7 or a 3-6, which means we would add an additional game in the SEC. Greg Sankey is a powerful man. He's a smart man. He's very influential. But he alone cannot go in there and wave a magic wand and say, all right, this is what we're going to do. Or can he?
Good morning, Rob. Scheduling at any level in any conference is the hardest thing to agree upon. For years, I've been a part of basketball committees, and we changed our model to allow us the flexibility in basketball double round robin to play our travel partner the last weekend. And what that did was it allowed everybody the flexibility that last weekend to have their shortest trip before the conference tournament. And it just made sense. So whatever Commissioner Sankey and the group decides, I've always been, it's pretty common sense to me. It should prevail. If you've got an example that you just posed there where Georgia's not been at Texas A&M in is that 12 years? How long they've been in the league now?
12 years.
It's been a while. Something needs to be revisited. So I would be all for adding a possible conference game. It just strengthens the whole group, and creating a model where, over at least a cycle, you're going to get everybody to play somewhere at different venues. And I know that's difficult because what people don't understand, when you add Oklahoma and Texas in the mix, when you add more to accomplish what you just said, may not be possible. I realize that.
And there are people, and we'll get into this again. John's going to be on about 15 after. But there are going to be people that hate, and who doesn't, losing these traditional rivalries, because tradition, history, heroes, that is what college football is all about. College sports are all about.
Right.
That's why we love the college games so much. Then you can argue that if you are having Alabama, Nick Saban is talking about, hey, I don't want to have to play, Alabama. I don't want to have to play Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn every year. They already do. Those are their permanent opponents. That was one proposed scenario that I saw. They were already playing them.
Right.
And now that extra conference game, you go to 9. If you do, what is ESPN going to say? And that's, we brought this question up yesterday on the show in talking with our guests. Is there more money out there? Franz Beard was on with us. I don't know. Dan Matthews over in Atlanta, Southern Sports Today, same thing. Is there more money from ESPN if they go from 8 to a 9-game schedule? Has that been discussed? You're right. It's got to be a very arduous process to figure all this out.
Well, Robin, I'm not a schedule maker for television and rights and advertisements. You would think all these deals are based on a per game basis. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there that if you went from 8 to 9, that there's an incremental rate. It's kind of like what you do. If I buy more shares, whatever, there's going to be a different cost basis, right? That's what I'm kind of looking at here. We don't know those numbers, but my God, with the popularity, would you rather want to watch Alabama play Akron on a bye week, or would you want to watch Alabama play someone in the SEC they didn't normally play? I know what I want. But again, you have to think about the number 9 when you play 9 games. 8 was a perfect model because you have 4 home, 4 away. When you go 9, you have to base it on a 2-year model, which what means is 1 year you get 5 home, the next year you get 4 home. So over 2 years, you're getting 9 home, 9 away. Does that make sense? So that's another consideration that has to be factored. And if I'm a team that has 5 home games and 4 away games, that year, right, wrong, or indifferent, I have a greater chance of getting to the championship game because my percentages of winning at home are much greater than on the road.
Well, you think about it. A typical home game in Tuscaloosa is worth, in the mid 30 million, 35 million a weekend for the Tuscaloosa economy. That's just one example. Or Fayetteville, Lexington. It's a big deal. So you do the 3-6. Again, 1 year you're going to have 5 home conference games. And then you can have you'll have 4 road conference games. That means you can have 3 non-conference home games. Right. Then that next year, you're going to be you still can have 3 non-conference games, 4 home conference games, but 5 conference road games. You're going to be losing a game every other year. Now, do you want to go tell the people, the local merchants, the business owners, the hotels, restaurants, everybody there that banks a lot of their year financially on those home games? We already are seeing it now, but we're already doing it. When you have to play a Power 5 team, like Auburn's got to go to Cal, Berkeley this year and play Cal. Okay. So they're giving up a home game. So we're already doing it. They can survive, but who wants to? Nobody wants to do that. I'm just wondering. I mean, the Kirby Smart has been saying this is a conversation that's ridiculous. It's about nothing. Either if it's 3-6 or if it's the 1-7, you're still playing everybody, I think, twice in a 4-year cycle.
Right. Right. And, quite frankly, this also may hurt Rob some of these week 1 games at neutral sites. If I only have 4 home games in conference, I may decide to play all my non-con at home that year, right? To balance out the equation that you were talking about. And ADs in charge of schedules now with this model are going to have to do a better job of due diligence at, forecasting opponents they can get to come home the year they lose a home site game, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a big deal. Basketball, you see this a lot. Schools now, early season, they'll take their program and they'll take their team and go all over the country.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Bobby Knight was famous building Indiana by playing really tough early season non-conference games. There are people that say, when the season starts in November, it's almost like a windshield wiper effect. Nobody notices it or watches it because it's trying to compete with college football. And then people say, well, let's start the basketball season, the college basketball season later. Well, once you get past that first week in April, you've got spring practice, you've got college baseball, you got Major League Baseball. So there's so many other sports. So it's basketball is very popular, but I think they would be fools to try that, waiting and starting in January.
Yeah, Rob, there's just not enough time to get all the games in if you don't start when you normally do. I mean, that's just the reality. So I think one of the things as a consumer-driven society that we like is the fact that in November, we can sprinkle in a dose of college basketball, knowing we still have big-time conference races coming to a forefront in college football, right? So from my standpoint, I would not change that model. And one of the things when we tweaked our conference schedule about 6 or 7 years ago, a lot of times, you end up giving up a weekend in the non-con, which formulates how you play your conference schedule. And what that happens at any level is there's more midweek games, and it's just common fact that it's harder sometimes to play midweek games because from a student athlete standpoint, you're looking at the missed travel time in class or the missed class time in travel. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And then, really from an attendance standpoint, if I'm going to take my kids and go to a game, even if I'm a season ticket holder, Rob, I prefer to do that on the weekend, don't I?
Yeah. Yeah. And scheduling, again, these SEC meetings, Greg Sankey's got a very tough job. I like Mark Keenum, the president. I think he's been at Mississippi State for close to 20 years. He was very straightforward about what they like and don't like and what they need to do and don't do. But there's a tremendous, the big discussion beyond this scheduling, they'll work that out.
Yeah. Is the
NIL rules. Missouri has that deal. If you're an in-state kid, you sign a scholarship in December with an in-state school, you're able to start receiving money on NIL immediately. That's exactly what this thing was not intended to do. And there are states like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. They're all getting really aggressive with the NIL rules. And then Mississippi, Alabama, they can't do in Florida. They would be in violation of their own state's laws if they did this. I mean, the Articles of Confederation, the preamble to the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, all that, all power is vested in the states. I think we forget that sometimes, but it's vested in the states. And now everybody's saying, we got to go to Congress. Are you kidding me? They could screw up a 2-car funeral. They do routinely. So where are we going to fix this? The NCAA, they got neutered years ago. Mark Emmert imitated Pontius Pilate when he just said, threw it out to the, y'all figure out this NIL. I don't want to do it. I need some smart people like you and John Hartwell to say, okay, what can we do to get people to agree? Because 50 different states with 50 different NIL rules, it's, as they say, unsustainable.
It is, Rob. And I know when John comes on, we're going to talk about it a little more detailed. But one of the things you touched on is just the difference in the state laws and the difference in what state to state you can do with NIL. And one of the things that John and I have always talked about, this was never meant to be an inducement. And my gosh, if you're talking about a high school kid now getting some NIL money, how is it not an inducement? It's been nothing but an inducement. So the NCAA put these rules out in regards to NIL, and it's just was not thought through properly. And we didn't take into account of all the geographic disparities we have in conferences.
Yes.
And how different states have different opinions of this and how it's being treated differently. And you can look, I mean, if you're in the state of Texas, you got a pretty good situation right now, don't you?
Yeah, you really do. And again, the NCAA right now, there's something called the Transition Committee that's dealing with cases that are outstanding, like the Tennessee case with Jeremy Pruitt. Well, yeah, it's legal now, but it damn sure wasn't legal then.
No.
I mean, have you ever seen a committee like that get anything done?
Rob, let me tell you something. I've been in an NCAA institution for 32 years, okay? Enforcement has always been the biggest thing that we strive for in terms of compliance. We want to make sure we're compliant. And when we're not, we know there's an enforcement mechanism that can penalize us. Right now, you tell me what is being enforced in NIL, Rob. What's going on?
Nothing.
And
Zero enforcement.
I think part of this, they're scared to do it because they know there's this imbalance with how things are regulated state to state. They know they can't. Rob, their hands are tied. They can't do anything right now. But try to figure this out. This out.
They can't.
I think underline, Rob, they're worried too that some of these cash cows are going to leave the association and follow Coach Sherrill's model that we discussed on here 2 weeks ago when he was catching that brown trout on the show.
Yep.
And there's a lot of validity to that, especially in college football. It's coming, Rob.
Yeah, and it's all about eyeballs. And also, though, I do like the fact that we got into on the side there, you're going to have your Power Five, and you'll have Group of Five schools that will make it too, but another national championship. And there will be just as much interest and just as much pride taken of anybody winning the national championship. You look at South Dakota State, what they're doing with their football program. There's interest in football anywhere you go in the country. Wyoming, one of the coolest things they have there, it's in Laramie, isn't it? University of Wyoming.
It is a beautiful place. Beautiful place.
And the High Altitude Performance Center. It's over 7,300 feet up on, above sea level. Yeah. That's Mexico City. Trust me. I've been to Mexico City before, and I would run from the gym at the U.S. Embassy back to the compound, about 3.5 or 4 miles. Not a far run, but the pollution in that city, plus the altitude, and you get back, and it was rough. But they want to win at Wyoming. They want to win in the Mountain West, and I want to get into it. San Diego State, are they going to be a member of the Pac-12? Right. There's so many working parts to this right now. NIL is there. I don't see NIL being. It's just not sustainable. Again, 50 states can have 50 different rules, and we're not getting anything done. I think people are trying to get it while they can, aren't they?
They are, Robin, and you being the finance person on this call, one of the things I thought about too with NIL, if you look at the 2020 election, you look where we are in 2023 and how much the country has changed in terms of the power of the dollar. And you being a finance person, if I got a lot of money, I was probably more, driven to possibly give some of my donor dollars towards some NIL in 2020. Now in 2023, I'm getting squeezed everywhere, Rob, and my donor dollars are less potentially, and that's going to affect the university that I support, because now I'm giving it towards a quarterback instead of a facility enhancement, Rob, and that hurts the whole bottom line.
Yeah, and that's the thing about these foundations. Some athletic departments now are separate from the university. You're giving perks and boosts. You saw that Ross Dellinger article in SI.com. I think I sent it to you. And it's really very, very – it's a scary scenario when you think you're getting all these perks, which is everything that we don't want college athletics to become. I mean, again – I say it a lot. I'm against anything that makes college sports more like pro sports. There are going to be schools out there. There are going to be boosters. There are not that many of them, but there's enough of them to screw this up for everybody.
Yeah.
I think the people that I work with, and I manage their money, my team and I do, they're not the people giving the NIL.
No.
Right. They got a lot of money. Fortunately, they're investing it with my team and me. But seriously, NIL coaches will tell you, "Oh yeah, we like it." Off the record, privately, they hate it.
Yeah,
because again, they're getting badgered. And I know this, and you know this. You talk to coaches, guys coming in their office. Hey, Coach Dean, man, I need another $50,000, man. My mother wants to get a new Cadillac or whatever. That's not your problem, Matt. You're a coach. You're a very smart guy, but your job is to build a team and build a program. And now you're having to be almost like an auctioneer and coach. And that's why we're losing coaches or getting out.
Yeah, and you combine NIL with the transfer portal. It's created true free agency in college athletics.
Yeah.
It's also created some angst amongst donors at like even group of 5 schools that may put money into a player. A player has a really good year, and the next thing you know, that player's leaving to go visit a Power 5, and that booster is just fit to be tied. They are madder than a hornet because that money travels with the kid.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. And Rob, as you talked about even in the article, I thought it was ironic, and you correct me if I'm wrong with what I read on that Dellinger article, but like with these priority plus points, whatever you want to call it, state to state, it looked like some donations were getting tax breaks and some were not. Is that accurate, or am I wrong there?
Yeah, they're being treated differently. And speaking of the tax man, let's bring in John Hartwell. But I do know that in February of 2017, the Trump Tax Reform and Reconciliation Act changed a lot of things about donations and buying the luxury suites at football stadiums or basketball arenas or whatever. It changed. But again, we have the tax man on here, ULM AD John Hartwell, back from those meetings down in y'all had him in what, Platte River, Nebraska? No, had him on 38 down in Destin. Why don't you have the winter meeting sometime? And let me tell you some places I've been before in the winter, like Chamberlain, South Dakota, where we got a 2-foot snowfall like that and 6-foot snow drifts that you open the door, it just caved in on you. But we're talking about tax treatment with NIL. You saw the article yesterday that Ross Dellinger wrote. If either of y'all know him, I would love to have him on the show. You know what's refreshing to see is a long, more than 600 or 700 word piece in investigative journalism on NIL. One SEC AD, who I think remains anonymous up to this point, said we're basically money laundering. John?
Yeah, Ross is a really good writer, and he did an excellent job on that article. And it's really, if and you may want to include the link somewhere for your listeners to hear, because it's really an NIL 101 lesson. I mean, there's a lot of detail in there that people don't realize is going on. But I know that's one thing that's under fire is the tax exempt status of some of these collectives. Some have been set up as 501c3s, some have not. So I think at some point that is going to the air is going to be popped out of that balloon in terms of being able to say that's a charitable donation, where basically the collective is a vehicle for channeling money to student athletes.
Yeah. Well, I know that, like, let's say you have an organization that has an annual budget of $10 million, and then you get a donor says, I want to give you 3 or 4 or 5 million. You can't do that, because I think the IRS might look at that and say, looks like you're trying to start your own personal private foundation. So there's limits on that. And these foundations and these collectives are basically going out and doing whatever they want. And I saw some of these people that are managing collectives. One of them has about 30. They said the mean is 2 to 3 million. Some have 7 to 10 million. Some have NIL of less than $1 million. Well, the NCAA has historically done everything they could to make it as fair and competitive as possible. You can't legislate who you recruit or how good your team is, but we're starting to see 50 different states, John. As I mentioned, the Constitution, all power is vested in the states.
Yeah,
it's not
And
centralized.
that's why, as we talked some last week, I think that's why it's so critical for us to get something from a federal standpoint and from Congress's perspective. You're not going to get that from the NCAA, because the NCAA, the minute they try to mandate something along those lines, there's going to be another antitrust suit out there. Congress is a different story. So that's the avenue to where there is some hope. But you're right. It's the Wild West right now. And what's interesting is, if you don't think athletics is not really, really important in a lot of these states, just look at the states who have passed multiple bills that are strictly for collegiate student athletes in that state. And it's I'm not going to say anything about Texas, but look at the time that the Texas legislature has spent on this topic.
Yeah. Matt?
No, we talked about that. Good morning, John. Good to see you. We talked about that before John came on. The state of Texas, if you look at the structure, especially of some of the collectives within that state for universities, they're doing quite well. I mean, I know I have a family member that worked for a state institution at Texas A&M, and 2 years ago, they had the #1 recruiting class in the country. And that's where a lot of angst went out, because there's still a lot of banter. You look at anytime we have a conversation with Lane Kiffin, he's taking shots a certain direction. And it's kind of interesting, because in some regards, Lane's exactly right.
Well, go John.
Go ahead, Rob.
Now you keep talking, because I've got a question for when you come back.
Yeah, it's again, somewhere there's got to be some parameters put around it, because you've just got so much going on right now. And here's what let's go back to your foghorn leghorn analogy. Here's what is happening at some institutions now. A lot of places have combined efforts and put it together, but you would never have multiple egos of wealthy donors at institutions, but let's just say you did. Well, one donor is involved in the startup or in the seed money, if you will, in one of these collectives, and you have another donor who says, well, I want to start my own. So you've got some of these institutions now that have 4, 5, 6 different collectives. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and it's chaos. And it's chaos not only for the people that they are soliciting, but it's chaos also for the student athletes. And I tell you, the people who are really scratching their heads right now are not just the athletics development people, but talk to people on the university side and the foundations and development people. And, they're up in arms because some of these collectives are going out on their own accord. They don't necessarily have donor lists, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to find some of that information. And they're soliciting some of those donors. And again, some of those donors who are not up to speed on what NIL is, saying, what the hell is going on here? I'm being barraged by, 5 different collectives who say they're, raising dollars to create NIL opportunities at XYZ University, at our XYZ University. Tell them to stop calling me. And the university foundation or the athletics department development people have to be careful about telling people to stop calling them who aren't technically affiliated with the university. So there are some ramifications that I don't think anybody thought about when all of this started.
Well, they didn't want to think about it. And tomorrow morning, we're going to be joined by Riley Gaines, swimmer at Kentucky, former swimmer at Kentucky. Looking forward to having her on. And the Title IX issue you mentioned is going to be brought up here soon. Look, Matt, you've coached women. John, you're an athletic director. I got 2 boys, 2 girls now with Mallory. Again, she went to Alabama, still a good person. But bottom line, 1972, 73, Richard Nixon was the president when Title IX came through. You've got to spend an equal amount of money. And in the case of Riley, I mean, she's fighting to keep women's sports for women. You don't want, Rocky Balboa, coming out there on the softball team. But I'm looking forward to talking with her about what is being done to protect women's sports with Title IX, because eventually I'm curious what percentage of the money that's coming into NIL is going to men's sports and what percentage is going to women's sports. I mean, it's a free market, and I get that, but the traditional fundraising, John, Matt, both of y'all, tell us if Foghorn Leghorn writes a check for $1 million and says, I want every penny of that to go to that football team there. I don't give a damn about them other sports. Are there any other sports anyway? That's what Foghorn thinks. How does it work in the real world?
Yeah, I know Foghorn's got a lot of zeros on the right side of his bank accounts and his investment portfolio. Yeah. But at some point, it's not an endless well for 99.999% of the people out there. So there is cannibalization because you only have, so much discretionary income. And if you're buying season tickets, if you're making annual donations, if you're contributing to capital projects, well, whatever you're now going to redirect to NIL is probably going to reduce some of those other line items that I mentioned.
Expand on that. You say now, yeah, I agree with you totally. In fact, and even the big donors, the uber wealthy donors, if they're being honest, are kind of resent being like every time something is needed. In Memphis, and everyone says, get FedEx to do it. I mean, it's not an endless well. Fred Smith, he doesn't have to do it, or Pitt Hyde, AutoZone. They don't have to do it. You got to, and you need to thank these donors that do what they do. But what they really like to see is other people carry, their share as well. Do what you can. What did Mother Teresa say? We can't do everything, but we can all do something.
Well, here's a great analogy along those lines, Rob, is if you have a donor who is contributing to bricks and mortar, Matt Dean sells some of that china in the cabinet there or crystal and silver and
Waterford crystal
there behind him. and he builds the Dean Dome, the new Dean Dome at Rhodes.
There you go.
There. That building is there forever. That building is not going to get up and say, well, gosh, we had a championship in this building last year. I'm going to try to parlay that and go to the University of Texas.
Yeah.
So that is permanent. In NIL, if you are giving and it's going to a kid, and that kid, for whatever reason, gets disgruntled at Rhodes or XYZ University and decides to go to ABC University, where's that money gone? It's not something where you can take your kids and your grandkids to say, hey, Bubba, look at the Dean Dome that our family's money built. You don't have anything tangible to do that, and that's another consequence of NIL.
Well, again, these kids they want to be treated like adults. They want to be treated like professionals. You ever heard of a non-compete? Wait till one of those things rips into your ass. It's coming. It is coming. I can tell you right now, you make a move for a 5-year deal and you get paid a big check up front. You try to split the scene 6 months, a year in, you're on the hook for X percentage or whatever. As Shoney always says, the big print in a contract giveth, the small print at the bottom taketh away. Who better to explain this and put all this complex minutia into the vernacular, like the Pope speaking 11 different languages at Mass at the Vatican in Rome? John Hartwell, AD at ULM, Matt Dean, Associate AD at Rhodes College in Memphis, right down the street from Rocky's, Alex's Tavern, 1445 Jackson. We'll be right back. One more segment. All right, I want to say something today. If you are out and about, go out to Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. They've got over 7,000 pairs of boots, unbelievable selection of clothing like Old South brand T-shirts and hats, Devil Dog jeans. If you're a size 40, you wear a 38. If you're 34, you wear a 32. You feel good about yourself. They've got tons of women's clothes. Audrey got a bunch of good-looking dresses out there the other day. I don't know much about dresses, but they look great. Charles and his wife Laura go out. Raven, they go out and pick the best stuff out there. HewlettandDunn.com. They will deliver anywhere. Matt, man, you both of y'all, you and John both nailed it. Traditional fundraising, whether it's Tide Pride or what do they call it in Iowa, the Hawkeye Foundation, wherever. What do you have at ULM? Brick and mortar. You're giving a gift. NIL, our own Frank Duffy, who's on this show regularly, he's on his West Coast trip right now. I would think he was following the Grateful Dead, but they're gone. But maybe he's following the widespread panic, but he'll be back soon. But 3 of his friends in Louisiana, all LSU guys last year, all business owners, all dumped money into NIL. And the 3 LSU players they were backing were AWOL when the bowl game came around. That is a major problem. I'd be madder than a soaking wet hen if that happened. If I put money into something, it's just like if you give your kid money allowance, or you give one of your children, you loan them a couple of $1,000s, and they just go blow it and waste it. NIL, look, it's only going to take a little bit of this to happen before donors are going to say, man, Because I already know of some stories where guys have gotten $200,000 and $300,000 left at the end of spring practice and went to another school. And you gave them that money, and they ain't paying you back.
No, and you know what's ironic is, Rob, you hit it on the head. People are starting to figure out what's going on, so that's going to lessen the amount they're going to give. It's basic economics. And John, another thing that's happening at our place, we started a platform at our level. We use Mogul, and as soon as we did it and it got out there in social media, our faculty were like looking at some of our athletes like they got a Dr. Pepper commercial with Bryce Young. It was incredible what people really don't know about what's going on at the different levels of NIL giving, right? And the faculty are another piece to this that rarely is discussed, but the faculty aren't happy about this either, John. I would imagine even at your institution.
Yeah, and you know, there has long been, I don't know if I should call it a divide, but some animosity between the academic side of campus and the athletic side of campus across the country. You don't just have to say that's at Cal Berkeley, but you know, across the country. And like you said, you know, things that we do as athletic directors or athletic departments to try to be cohesive with the academic side of campus. Things like this, you're right, that it just creates further animosity that's not good. So it, you know, makes it a little more difficult to you know, try to keep those relationships tight. And you know, going back to the Ross Dellinger article and some of the comments that Saban's made this week, you know, that you know, here's a guy that, and rightfully so, is revered for his success and the way he's gone about things. And, you know, I think he made a statement this week that basically says, hey, let's pull the mask off. This is pay for play at the highest level, and they really are like employees. Well, and I know, you know, he just said that in an interview, but if we get to that point, we've got real challenges in this industry about student athletes or a segment of student athletes becoming employees.
Well, somebody on this show recently talked about a student athlete that got a W-2 and was told by his tax preparer, whoever that was, when he asked him, he said, well, why do I have to pay taxes? Hell, I've already spent the money. I mean, you know, that's going to happen. It already is happening. And we talked about the Georgia defensive lineman who transferred to Southern Cal. He's from Texas. Bear Alexander, is that his name? He's living in some luxurious apartment. And yesterday, and that was brought up by Dan Matthews, our friend over in Atlanta, executive producer of Southern Sports Today with Chuck Oliver. And he said, you know, who can afford that? Here's this kid. He's a sophomore in college, living in Los Angeles like that. Man, Los Angeles, I'd be climbing the walls at night if I had a 19-year-old kid living in a penthouse type apartment in Los Angeles, going to playing football at Southern Cal. I mean, as a coach, what are you going to do if a kid pulls up? Quinn Ewers drives a Lamborghini, I think, the quarterback at Texas. And C.J. Stroud, I think, drove a Bentley. Okay. Again, it's a free country, but in the past, I mean, that was a 5-alarm, you know, red flag for the NCAA. But now it's okay. He's just expressing himself. He's identifying as a billionaire today.
Yeah, I think all of those examples, Rob, make it even harder for what, again, is our core business. Don't ever forget our core business. What it is supposed to be is educating young men and women through the vehicle of sports. But if a kid's living in a luxurious penthouse suite, whether it's in Los Angeles or Lower Alabama, wherever it may be, I mean, again, or driving a Lamborghini, are they, after practice is over at night, are they going back to their dorm room or their apartment or whatever it may be? Or are they going to study hall? Are they really focusing on academics?
Yeah.
We have thrown it. It was difficult enough for student athletes to prioritize between academics, athletic pursuits, personal life, being in college life, whatever that's defined as for individuals. It's different for different individuals. But now all of a sudden you say, well, hey, I've got all of this money or these, cars or living arrangements or whatever being thrown at me. Let's get back to the baseline that we're in the education business.
Yeah, and I just got a correction from one of our listeners. We have very smart listeners. Quinn Ewers drives an Aston Martin. The running back, Bijan Robinson, Lamborghini. That's what everybody drove at the Sigma Newhouse when I was in college. I mean, Lamborghini. This is
well, Rob. When they were driving, how did your AMC Pacer stick out like a sore thumb when you were there?
I had a Camaro, man, the gray dog. I loved that thing, and holy cow! I don't know if you heard that one. I think that one was 20 feet above the house. The crop dusters, man. It's the Red Bear, and they're having an aerial war out here, spraying for insects, nematodes, and other things. But guys, this is where we're going. Again, Matt, you're at a college at Rhodes. John, you're at ULM. You're there to get a degree. I'm telling you right now, these as a coach, how are you going to get these kids' attention? You already in the NFL and professional sports, anybody will tell you the reality. You don't do something, you can flip a coach off, say something. Look, old school, I'll admit. I mean, I went to Christian Brothers High School, man. It was intense discipline. I saw guys get picked up off the ground for back talking or being disrespectful to a teacher. I'm talking, this was a man's school. It was discipline. We need that. We say, oh, you can't do that anymore. Well, that's why we're in the mess we are. It's because we don't discipline people anymore. But if you're a coach and you're coming to practice and your players are driving up in these cars, they're probably not listening to you. And how are you going to build a team culture when these guys have got all this money and they're out on their boats on the lake playing around? And again, the one that gets me is, well, they can take care of their families at 18. You know what these other people need to do? Quit putting that pressure on them. Quit telling them, go earn your own damn money. And that's why I despise, detest, and hate. I don't like NIL. I'm just telling you. We got to deal with it because it's here, but you're there to get an education. And Brother Joel told me one time, Matt, in summer school, after my sophomore year at Christian Brothers, it was 172 degrees and the air conditioning went out. And I raised my hand, and Brother Joel, a LaSallian brother, paused and looked at me in the class and just paused for about 30 seconds, didn't say a word. And he goes, Mr. Browne, it is better to suffer. May we continue? Yes, sir. He goes, thank you. And we just went on. It's okay. Most every client I have is first generation wealth. And a lot of them they've been broke or bankrupt one or two times. They had a business partner take off with their money. They had a CFO that tanked them. There are horror stories out there, but all you can do is keep fighting and keep working. John, your first couple of days at the Citadel, you were probably like, what in the hell have I signed up for? I think I'll go walk on at the University of Anchorage and be on the ski team. Anything is better than this. But you persevered. You hung in there and you fought. Matt Dean, you were a manager at Drake. You came from the Quad Cities. You came from Davenport. You'd always played basketball, and now you're a manager, but you probably played in practice. And you know damn well if that coach had ever said, Matt, we're down a man, I need you to dress out tomorrow. I can't promise you'll get any time on the hardwood, but be ready. You'd have been like, sir, yes, sir. You would have been ready. John, you know the same thing. We're not teaching these kids. And all these people can tell me about, well, you're living in a different world. The reason we have the problems we have today is nobody's putting their foot down. Who's backing Riley Gaines to save women's sports? Nobody. They're all scared. I'm going to tell you something. She's got more courage than it looks to me like the majority of men in this country. I mean, and she's getting no support. You know, her dad, Brad, played football at Vanderbilt, was a tight end there. And her mother played softball at Austin Peay. She comes from good stock. And she's 22 years old. And she's, you know, we're going to have some people. I want to see some people stand up about NIL and say, look, I came to college to get an education, to be part of a team, and nobody's doing that. Thank God, John, what you're saying and what you're saying, Matt, is the traditional, the faculty. I mean, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes we're not hearing about.
Rob, I want to make a quick point, John, before you go. Let's go back to the thought process involved about how do you maintain a culture amongst the challenges that NIL presents these days. Well, I think Nick Saban's handled it really well. I mean, I really do. I mean, Bryce Young had one of the biggest deals in the history of NIL. Looked like it didn't affect their football team much. Last year, Texas A&M had the number one class in the country and went 5-7. You have to be able to adapt to the times. That's how you do it. The good coaches now may not like NIL. They may not like the transfer portal, but they have figured it out. There's a lot of dinosaurs out there, Rob, that they're gonna get out of the association, whatever, because they can't figure it out. And that's
you got to. And this just came in from one of our listeners. I love it. Jim Neighbors, Sylacauga, Alabama. When I was in college, I had a Plymouth Valiant followed by a yellow Ford Courier pickup. Damn glad to have them both. Neither air conditioned. See. And that guy today is very successful. I know him. He works harder than a dozen Mennonite farmers. But those are the stories. Think about it. You know, John and Matt, I'm not saying that I don't want these guys to be successful. It's anything but I just think when you take the hard work route, the hard path to success, you know, anything worth having is worth fighting for. It's worth working for. When people give you something, and you didn't pay for it, come on. You're a lot less likely, especially if you know they'll give you another one if you tear it up. You don't care. But when you've got your sweat equity, your money, your time, your effort into it, and you're part of a team culture as a coach, as a player, you feel differently about it. And that's a good thing. And I'm telling you, I got a ton of respect for both of y'all for what you do. I'm learning more, and I'm getting all kind of texts from people going, I had no idea what an athletic director really has to do. Every time y'all are on, you know, hey, man, Sports Illustrated, they need to do an issue with the front cover of the athletic directors of America and the swimsuit models, too. but what athletic directors do is we hear about CEOs and CFOs of Fortune 500 companies. Well, the ADs are that for the colleges. I don't care D1, D2, D3. And I don't say that just to placate the two of y'all. I really feel that way because God bless America. If we lose college sports and we just have a handful of schools that are just paying kids, we're going to lose college. And we can't let that happen. And we got to have people fight and quit being afraid of what might happen and think about what will happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great lessons, one of many great lessons that sports teaches us is dealing with adversity. And about, you know, yeah. I can remember as a young kid, my dad used to say adversity builds character. And it really does. That has not changed in 50 plus years. But today, like you said, kids are going the path of least resistance. Oh, if I face adversity here, I'm just going to check out and go another direction. And that sets up bad habits that last a lifetime. Oh, if this job is not good, or if it's too tough, I'm gonna go somewhere else. And quitting becomes a habit, or running from challenges becomes a habit. And again, I go back. That's one of the things that makes sports so great. That's one of the things that makes employers want to hire people who have been student athletes, and we've got to protect that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I think back the lessons along the way, the coaches, the teachers, the people that, bottom line, you have any respect for as an adult with kids years later, like all of us are the ones who were the toughest on you. And I had a GA one time in college when I blew a test. She goes, look, don't get mad about it. Do something about it. I'm like, that's what you got to do. You're graduating high school early, enrolling in January. They get through with spring practice in football, and their third team on the depth chart, they're already going to transfer. As a coach, you would think that you would have the player would come to you and say, what do I need to do? Well, you tell them, work harder, work smarter, get with the top people. And now you're not even having that conversation with them. You're at home with your family. Well, if you're a coach, I don't know when you get to spend time with your family during football season, but we're watching on the crawl on TV at night, and that kid is in the transfer portal, because you were too tough on him. Again, all I know is this, John, when you started at the Citadel, there were a bunch of guys you'd never met in your life from all over the country. It's like a buddy of mine from Fairhope, Alabama, said he bombed out academically at Auburn, wasn't doing well, so his parents said, why don't you just spend the winter at Parris Island? So he joined the Marine Corps Reserves. He said it was all splits and giggles there at the airport in Charlotte till the old gray bus pulled up and they were driving across the causeway out there to Hilton Head, or past Bluffton, and out there to Parris Island. There's a big sign you see and it says, this is where it all begins. You took guys from all over the country, east of the Mississippi, west, of course, goes to San Diego Marine Corps Depot. Guys from all over the country, every kind of background. And within 13 weeks, you had a unit that was clicking on all cylinders. They pushed them, and he said, you know what I found out? I was lucky. I came from a family with some money in college, but my parents made their point to me. This guy came back and graduated and did it all right. But he said these kids that had come from damn near nothing, family didn't have two nickels to rub together. They loved those drill instructors because they said, I'd never had anybody I knew that loved me that much. He said, what do you mean? He goes, because they never would let me quit. And that's what you got to think about as an athletic director, both of y'all, as coaches. That's what you're there for. You're not there to broker deals, and this is what we got to stop. And I think we're starting to see some traction. I know we got a lot of cynics out there. They're going to say, Rob, you're dreaming. No, I'm not. I always get what I want. I'm persistent. I will not fail. I will not lose. I will not falter. What did Sergeant Hartman say in Full Metal Jacket? You got to have that kind of attitude. But I think both of y'all are to be commended for what you're doing. So, Matt, tell people how they can support and follow you, and same thing with you, John, and we'll let you go.
At Dino Hoops 44, if you want to follow me on Twitter. Usually retweet a lot during the NBA playoffs, but been at Rhodes College for 32 years. If you're ever in Memphis during the season, come by and watch a game. Free season tickets.
I love it, man. Both of y'all basketball players, I'm going to have to put a team together of Sidelines. Yes, I'm going to get Ben Troop on there as well as a power forward.
We need Ben.
Nice. No, I appreciate the opportunity. As always, guys, it's tremendous visiting with you all. I learn something every day, and it's great knowledge and even better people. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you guys. John_Hartwell is my Twitter. You can follow all of the opportunities and successes of ULM Warhawk Athletics, ULMWarhawks.com. Summer school started 2 days ago. Got football and men's and women's basketball here. September 2nd will be here before we know it. The Army cadets coming to town to take on the Warhawks in our season opener. That we found out yesterday that's going to be live on the NFL Network. NFL Network's now getting into some college games, so doing our game on there. So that'll be here before we know it. But again, great dialogue with you guys, and I greatly appreciate it.
Hey, look, man, we thank you, and this is going to be. I love hearing all this. We'll do it again next week. Want to say we got a great show tomorrow. Going to start off with Riley Gaines, Doug Dean, Tony Barnhart, Bo Carter, Ben Troop. Going to be a lot of fun. Hey, folks, we most often see the face of Christ in the least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We're all blessed. Go out and take the opportunity to help others. I love what both of y'all say. Don't ever forget the people that help you along the way. You may have hated them at the time, but you'll love them now when you're older with kids and grandkids. Those coaches, those teachers, the people that never allowed you to quit. Until then, have a great day. We are out of here.